Welcome to the TikTok podcast. The clock is always ticking, so let's synchronize our watches and dive in. I'm your host, Callie Brigham, and I'm here to help you make time for what matters. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the TikTok podcast. I come from a family of gatherers. It is a long-standing generational, just beautiful history, her story, I guess you could say, of gatherers. My great-grandmother always had the coffee pot on. She always had the light on and the door open, and anytime somebody wanted to just step in and be heard or have a conversation, she was ready. My grandmother, many of you know her. She's been on the podcast before, Grandma Deedle, definitely a gatherer of people. She would have the after symphony parties with many people milling about and way into the wee hours of the night. And for her 100th birthday party that we just had, she even had a signature cocktail. So she definitely knew how to have a good time. My mom is a gatherer too. So you can see we've learned from generations. I remember one Thanksgiving in particular that a first-time Thanksgiving guest to our home, well, my mom's home, actually took a nap on the couch. That's how comfortable people felt coming over to my mom's house. And then it continues. My 13-year-old daughter, Maddie, just had a pamper party, a skincare party with 12 teenage girls, 6 moms. There was a charcuterie board and a mocktail bar. I'm telling you, we love to gather people, but sometimes it's easier said than done. And that's where my amazing guest comes in today. So let me introduce to you Kayty. Kayty Helgerson. She's a hospitality educator and the owner of Gather International Living and Everyday Hospitality. So now you understand where the gathering came from for our theme of today. As a public speaker, a food stylist, a writer, and an inspiring interior designer, she is set out, I love this mission, you guys, to see our generation come back to the table through hospitality. Her company, Gather, started as a small New England business and throughout the pandemic has experienced tremendous growth, and they have now shifted to virtual. So we're going to be able to benefit from her today. Through this shift, they welcome guests from all 50 states, 6 countries, and they have hundreds of workshops on charcuterie, obviously one of my favorites, cake decorating, and hospitality education. They have since expanded to offer a podcast, which I have been consuming and loving it. It's called Making Room by Gather, and it talks through various dynamics that come up around the table. A blog that offers special diet recipes, and a shop with products that make gathering effortlessly beautiful. Set out to educate and inspire a new approach to everyday hospitality, one that has connection at the forefront. Gather is just getting started. And I'm just getting started with my new friend, Kayty Helgerson. Kayty, welcome to the show, my friend.
We are here. We made it. We're here.
We did. If you guys only knew.
I'm so proud of us.
I am too. Gold stars, confetti for us.
Yes.
And Kayty, we've only ever communicated over Facebook Messenger, email, a couple of text messages, but we got 2 busy moms.
Yes.
Right as summer starting for me, new baby for you. And we made it. We made time for it.
Yes. Time management. Look at that.
Sometimes easier said than done, right?
I know. Let's dive in.
Let's go. And so obviously we're going to make time for what matters when it comes to relationships, getting people around a table. I love something that I heard you say on your podcast, that it's about accepting invitations. It's about inviting people to gather around a table to have those relationships being built. So since most of us, you're a new friend of ours, would you just go ahead and tell us a little bit about this background and why this is a passion for you?
Oh my goodness. Wow. Well, friends, to start off, I'm a little bit sleep deprived, which might mean I might be a little bit emotional. No kidding. sleep
It would be the
deprivation.
first time somebody's been emotional on the podcast. No matter what, it's all good.
I know. No, it's super near and dear to my heart. So, yeah, my name is Kayty. I've been married to my college sweetheart for going on 9 years, which is insane. I was telling someone the other day, once you're over 5 years married, you just start to feel old. It's like we are not like little college kids anymore. We are in the thick of adulthood, right? But we've been together since we were 18. We have Wesley James, our first baby, who is 8 months old. And yeah, the first 3.5 years of our marriage were spent in Chiang Mai, Thailand, a city in northern Thailand in Southeast Asia. And while we were there, we were doing nothing to do with culinary arts or charcuterie. My background is social work. We were working in anti trafficking and child exploitation work. My husband was working with the Thai government. I was on the nonprofit side. And while we were there, we were newlyweds, madly in love, super excited, young 20s, right? And we did not anticipate the loneliness that was going to come. And I mean, shocker, right? Leave everyone, move halfway across the world. Of course, that's going to happen. But we got there and we were like, wow, there's a unique invitation that we have in front of us. And the invitation is to either accept the loneliness as a reality of our life, which I think a lot of us are offered the same invitation in adulthood, or to do something about it. Now, I wasn't as conscious that this was happening. It was kind of subconscious, but looking back, I'm able to kind of see it all play out. And I was like, wow, okay, I'm 23 years old in the loneliest season of my life, halfway across the world. What am I going to do about this? And I was seeing we were definitely connected by people in different areas. At work, there were people, at the store, there were people, but none of those opportunities yielded the connection I was looking for. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to dive deep. If you know me, I'm a 1 or 100 type person. I don't do the middle ground very well. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to invite over literal strangers, like anyone I meet, and they're going to come over my new house that I'm still decorating, and we're going to do this. And I saw a few things happen. The first was that people were hungry for an invitation. And I think our culture says right now that it is super weird to be an initiator of hospitality. But I saw that it was something that people were craving. And so they were just as hungry for community that I was. But the most important thing that I saw was that the connections happening at the table were so much more rich and deeper, filling that like a longing in my heart for community that wasn't happening in other places and culture. So this story is very long and we could be here for an hour, but I guess all of this to say, I saw that hospitality, the need for hospitality was not just something that I craved, but that our culture was craving. And as we moved back to the States, I was like, wow, this is going to be the richest season of community in my life. And that was not the case. I saw it was the first time living as an adult stateside, like a real adult, not a college adult. And I was like, wow, okay, I kind of got all of this firsthand self-taught in the deep end hospitality education. Let me turn this into a business to teach people how to do it. And a lot started from there. A lot has changed from there. But really what I'm doing is trying to meet there's a loneliness epidemic happening, right? And the way that our culture teaches hospitality is not one that often leads to connection. It's often a different messaging. And so I'm trying to change the narrative and get us back to the table.
Okay, so I've got a lot of thoughts here, and I know we're
Go for
a
it.
lot of places. Yeah, a lot of places that we're gonna go. First of all, one of the things that I like to teach my daughter is to be the first friendly, is what
Mhm.
we've called it, to be the
Yeah.
first one to extend that invitation because so many times that person would say yes. They would be willing, they would reciprocate, but maybe they just don't have the confidence or the training or the education or whatever the case may be to say yes. So you took initiative there
Mhm.
and you describe it as hospitality. Can you explain what is hospitality? It's really a general word. What is
Yeah.
hospitality and maybe what do we think it is and what should it be?
So I'll be honest as I answer this. This is something that I'm trying to actively chew through and define myself because I'm trying to kind of chart a new path, right? And so I'm going to answer the best I know how to, like in this season. But I will say this: I'm at the very beginning of writing my first book, and the team that I'm working with, they said, "Kayty, we just have one rule for you as you're doing this: you're not allowed to use the word entertaining." And I thought that was so profound because, and I actually asked them why. It's not a word that I use often. But I was like, I'd love to know your why behind that. And they said, culture is steering away from it. They don't want to be entertained, they want connection. And so the word hospitality, I actually don't love. It's the best word for me to use because people often think the hotel industry. They think Airbnbs, they think that kind of route. Um, I, I don't think our culture knows the type of hospitality that I'm trying to invite them into. As a culture, we've steered away from that. So the word is more gathering, I guess. It's a blend between what we know. If you look at it like a triangle, it's somewhere in the middle between entertaining, hospitality, and gathering. And so for me, it's inviting people into your everyday life, inviting people to, I guess, inviting celebration back into our lives, celebrations of the little things from mundane to huge life milestones, not just inviting people over to a dinner party, but to really be a part of your life, using our home as kind of like the main point to for connection. Trying to spitball a little bit more. But yeah, hospitality is an extension of ourself for the sake of connection.
Do you think that sometimes the hesitation to be proactive in that is because either the pressure of the entertainment that it has to be
Yeah.
perfect and the table has to look right and the house
Mhm.
has to be cleaned and the kids have to act right and
Yeah.
who has time or energy for that? So to me, you're not describing that,
No.
which pulls energy away from us, which makes us feel whether it's like that guilt of things aren't my home isn't right, my baseboards aren't clean. You're not
Uh-huh.
talking about that. You're talking about truly seeing people, spending quality time with them. Is that what
Yeah.
you're
Yeah,
implying?
so I'm so glad you brought that up because this is gonna help me, like, finish that thought. So, I believe that the 3 pillars of hospitality are food, design, and relationships. And, I think that all 3 of them have to be present in order for there to be an effective gathering. Now, what has happened is I think that it has become off balance in our culture. Either one of them is more prevalent than the other, or I talk about this a lot. I think that there has been a huge shift in culture from away from how does this make you feel to how does this make me look. Now, I think that people try to villainize design, like, oh, design is too showy, design is uninviting. I don't agree. I think that things like design or things like food are incredibly important. It's just all about the motive behind it and the approach. And so as we move forward with gather and more towards like the education, that's the rewriting that I'm trying to happen, because I do believe that design and dignity are directly connected, things like that. So does that answer your question a little bit more?
It does, and I think then
Yeah.
it can be customized to the person because when you
For
say, "How
sure.
does that make me feel?" as opposed to, "How's that make me look?" Someone
Mhm.
that does love a beautiful tablescape, that
Yeah.
makes them feel like they have really given a gift to their guests that are coming, right? Or
Yeah.
somebody that says, "That makes me feel super stressed out. I don't have time for that, but you know what I could do? Some really great throwaway plates that I don't have to do the
Yes.
dishes, but they look
Yeah.
nice, right? So
Yeah.
really it can be customized, and I know we pull in the time factor, but as I mentioned to you earlier, time management is really emotional and energy management. So it's
Yeah.
those things that make you feel alive and joyful and want to have people over, as opposed to the things that will, check off a box or, the Pinterest pressure kind of thing.
And the time management piece, I love that you brought that into this, of course, but I am a huge like I love to encourage moms, especially people in our kind of stage and age and all of that. When hospitality becomes a main value in your life or a priority in your life and you make it a way of life, your life is spent preparing for it. And so you approach the way that you look at home differently, the way that you look at your grocery shopping differently, the way that you learn to get yourself ready, all of these things, so that it's kind of a system that you're setting up in place before a gathering even happens, so that when you have a spontaneous guest, when you invite people over, your lifestyle, your life is actually already ready for it. And I think what's happened is, again, this is obviously something I'm very passionate about recently. You'll hear me say this a lot. We have shifted to a focus on independence and success as a culture. And we're taught to after you graduate from college. But if we really take the time to shift to community and creativity as the main value, there's nothing wrong with success, but as the main value in our life, stress is different. Stress, yeah. I guess I'll
Mm.
say that. We could dive in if you want.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say, can we keep going with that a little bit?
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, so if we give ourselves the permission to prioritize creativity in our schedule, if that is the main focus, we spend more time creating home. And I don't mean a Pinterest perfect home that you could win awards for, but I just mean creating a space that you feel confident in, the nest for your family, telling story through design. You're spending time organizing and cleaning and decluttering. You're spending time, I don't know, reaching out to people, creating connections, all of these things. Um, yeah, stress is different because your focus is different. And
So where does somebody start with this? If this is a
yeah.
paradigm shift and they're like, "Well, I don't even know where I would begin,"
Mhm.
where do they start to prioritizing their creativity in their and again, going back to how does my
Mhm.
space make me feel? How does my
Yeah.
kitchen and my dining how does that make me feel? Where do they
Yeah.
start?
Okay, so there's a few different directions that we could go, and I would say the first thing is, it's going to take a conscious shift to give yourself the permission in your schedule to, like, carve out time, right? Because we are so used to our kids being in 100 sports and saying yes to every meeting at work and every volunteer opportunity, all of those things. And so trying to organize my thoughts as we're talking, but the first thing that I tell people that are trying to make friends as adults is to put a block of time in your calendar at the same time every month, Friday night from 5 to 7, Saturday morning 10 to 12, whatever. And you have to treat that like the most important board meeting that you're going to get fired if you don't attend. And the reason that I say that is that's how urgent it is, guys, that we have connection, that we have hospitality, that if we don't become intentional with the time, it won't happen. But what happens there is you do these 2-hour blocks every month. I would love every week, but let's say every month. And you see the depth and the richness of it, that it no longer becomes a chore. And slowly the priority shifts, the schedule shifts, and you want more time of that and less time with other things. When it comes to creating home, again, I think we look at Pinterest and when we hear creating home, we're like, oh, the goal is perfection. It's not. I think so many of us have so much chaos in our homes, we can't imagine different. But I love this example. When we moved to Thailand, working in anti trafficking, the work was gruesome. It was heavy, emotionally heavy. And our leaders said the first thing I want you guys to do, and the most important thing that you can do, is to make your space an oasis. And I was like, how does making our space an oasis and this like connect? But we saw that when we felt confident in our space, when it was an extension of us, there was a release of stress that happened when we were there. When people entered into it, it was a safe place, and design has that ability. So that's the kind of design intentionality I'm talking about. And so I always tell people the first place that you could focus on, just to really, really break it down, is what I call the feast flow. And so, what this means to me is when a guest enters your house, what is the literal walking path that they will take when they're in your house? If there is a back random storage room, don't worry about that yet. If there is a random game room upstairs that no one goes in, don't worry about that yet. Focus on the feast flow of your I mean, I guess your first floor, depending on your layout. Um, get that in a stage that tells your story that you feel so confident about, because then every time you're walking in and out of your house, you're also walking that. But when you have a spontaneous guest come over, you feel ready. So that's kind of one of my tangible, attainable things.
That's a great starting point, I think, for people too,
Mhm.
is the idea of welcoming somebody into a safe place. Not a
Yeah,
perfect place,
not
not
perfect.
even a
No,
completely cleaned spick and
no.
span place, but a safe place where
Yes.
they feel comfortable, kinda like comfortable enough, like that guest did, to take a nap on my mom's couch, which was
Yes.
it was literally in that main room where they just,
Mhm.
were connecting with people and gathering, together, and
Yeah.
that's the ultimate, don't you think?
Yes, absolutely. And then food, I'm gonna be posting about this soon. I think our culture says, like, especially with Pinterest and everything, I love inspiration, I love food design, but frozen isn't bad, potlucks aren't bad, none of those things disqualify you from hosting, and so I never want my message to be misinterpreted to say that, because I am, like, the first one to pull out something from my freezer. I actually always have a dozen of cookies in my freezer that I could defrost at any time, and so I want people to know that about me too, but I think that there's something to say about giving yourself the permission to learn how to cook over time. Don't put so much pressure on yourself like, "Oh, I have to make I don't know, the fancy French chicken when people are coming over," and you're learning how to do it an hour before they walk in the door. Don't do that to yourself. Give yourself permission in your schedule. I tell people a new recipe a month or a week, depending on what your life allows, gives yourself permission to learn over time so that when people are coming over and all eyes are on you, you already know what you're gravitating towards. And so that's what I'm talking about, the lifestyle of hospitality. I think some people are definitely born with a natural leaning. But I think all of us are invited to this lifelong learning, and we have to give ourselves permission to do that.
So I'm gonna ask you to give us a few other examples here. I loved you've got frozen cookies in the freezer
Mhm.
all times that you can pull out, especially if
Yeah.
there's an unexpected guest or you went out to dinner and now you're inviting the people back, for after dinner
Mhm.
coffee and cookies or something like that. So
Yeah.
I would love for you to think if there's a few other practical applications, whether it is having some nuts and olives or whatever in your pantry or, just like those go-to things. But I have to say, Katie, what you just said reminded me of when I invited our brand new neighbors over. We had both
Mhm.
moved in 1 month from each other, right? So our
Yeah.
houses are not exactly the way we want them to be yet, but we invited them over. I'd gone and bought a store-bought pie,
Yeah.
and I put it in my own pie pan and
Hey,
baked it,
yeah.
right? So the neighbors come over and this beautiful smelling pie is coming out of the oven, and my parents happen to walk in. They live in the same neighborhood, and my mom was like, "Did you did you bake this pie?" I'm like, "Well, sort of." And just at that moment, the neighbor had brought a dish too in her own pan, and it was
Yeah.
some really amazing seafood situation. And I look at her and she looks at me and she goes, "I bought it earlier today from whatever store," and I put it in my own pan. I go, "I bought the pie from the store," and it actually bonded us together, made us feel so much more comfortable about the rest of the night that
Yes.
neither one of us had slaved in the kitchen, and here we had a really lovely time together.
Absolutely, and that's what happens again, there's a few different conversations that we're having, but, but they all are under the same umbrella, and I tell people prim and proper hosting and connection are like oil and water. I think that, our culture is telling us everything has to be polished and perfect, and you can't admit fault, and you can't ask for help, and all of these things, but what happens is when our level of authenticity is the level of authenticity that we're inviting. And so we have to be authentic with our guests. We have to let real life happen because you know what it does? It allows them to let their real life happen and that's where connection happens, right? And so when I'm talking about creating the feast flow of your house and designing that, I'm talking about kind of like the foundation, right? But in that foundation, I'm still having pile of laundry in my living room, right? It's just I'm happy with I don't know, like the background, like the frame, right? And so I love that you admitted that, and I think that's where this new generation of hospitality is going and
Well,
needs to
and
go.
I think it is. It's a new generation, and we're also tapping into for some of us, some of the history. I have an aunt who, at every dinner party that she would throw, somewhere towards the beginning, she would spill something
Mhm.
on purpose. Well, we know now it was on purpose, but she would
Okay.
spill something, a glass, a little glass of wine, or she'd spill and go,
Mhm.
oh my goodness, look at me. Oh, and she'd clean it up and whatever. But she did it on purpose, Katie. She hosted this, these gatherings so that if anybody else spilled after her, she'd be like,
I
oh,
love
I already
it.
spilled. I mean,
I
so we
love
can
it.
tap into some wisdom of an aunt like that and be
Yes.
authentic, be real, make people feel comfortable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to jump back to the question you asked to give a few more examples. And so I'm going to give a few different types. The first one I'll give as a design one and then a food based. This might not have been what you were thinking, but I think that there's like something here for people. It's so practical. So when we were in Thailand and people always said they felt like our house was a safe space. I was like, man, what is it? Like, is there a formula here that we can replicate? Because it wasn't intentional. It just kind of was organic over time. And I realized that it was the combination of space, lighting, and music. And so a lot of us have an Alexa, or I have to be careful when I say that because my Alexa goes on when I say it, but some kind of like music system in our house. Oh yeah, space, lighting, music, fragrance. There's four. And so you can very easily, no matter if your house is spotless or filthy, set the tone of any gathering with the music that you play. And so think Michael Bublé when you want something a little bit more chill. I don't know, something Pitbull. I don't know, when you want energy. And then instant ambiance and I'll say cozy with some kind of fragrance or lighting. It also covers up any cleaning you may or may not have done, right? So fragrance, music, lighting. People, it's easy to be in a space for a long time and not think about this, but make sure you have dim lighting and bright lighting, right? If you have dim lighting on, but you want it to be a game night, you might not get the same energy that you were hoping for. And so make sure you have accent lights and main lights, and then space. My favorite addition to my living room, and maybe this is a norm, I don't think it is, but is a blanket basket. They're not perfect blankets, but they are always there. And so if my living room is trash and my son's toys are all over the floor and a guest comes over, they could still be cozy in a second. And you know what I love about that? Something about a blanket basket, people don't ask for permission. They just know that they're able to tap into cozy right away. None of these things are things that you have to shop for. They are in place all the time. They're ready to go in your living room or your sunroom, ready for you to tap into. And so that's kind of like my magic four for instant ambiance. When it comes to food, I love that you were talking about the store bought pie. My favorite dessert, especially for this time of year, it's naturally gluten and dairy free, which I think is great for every host. But I can assure you it's good enough that you could serve it to everyone, which is always the goal. I either go to my local store and get a frozen vanilla loaf, or Trader Joe's has these Madeline cookies. They're in the gluten free section. They taste vanilla y. And I make a strawberry shortcake. And so, but in a semi homemade. So I always think of Sandra Lee when I say that. But so you use that as the base. There is a Cool Whip brand called Cocoa Whip. It's coconut based, tastes just like Cool Whip. You can get it at any store near you. And so I do the vanilla loaf or the Madeleines with a generous scoop of the Cocoa Whip. And the only thing that you could have those two in your pantry right now. The only thing I would have to buy fresh is strawberries. And to make it a little bit more pretty, if you need to, I just do a sprig of mint on top. No cooking, no baking, instant strawberry shortcake. And I guess one more that I'll give, if you're a Trader Joe's fan, they have amazing kind of like antipasto spreads. So there's a red pepper eggplant one, an artichoke one, and like an olive tapenade, whatever. I keep at least one of those in my pantry at all times. And then if you have bread, crackers, it doesn't even matter. You put those two things out. The flavor is so rich. People love it. You feel good. And no baking, which we all love, right?
Obviously, as you know, I bought the store, but I did bake, by the way. One Thanksgiving, I made from scratch apple crumb pies. Somebody had given me the recipe, and it probably took me 4 hours. I mean, I baked the pie crust from scratch, and it was
Mhm.
eaten in about 5 minutes, and I thought, "It tasted great, but
Wasn't
never again." Like, that
I
did
don't
not
know.
match up to my, expectations of how much love I was gonna get from it. They all loved it, but then it was gone, and yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's so hard. It's so hard. I was just thinking, I like to talk about the 3 topics at the same time, design, food, and relationships. And so if it's okay, I'm just gonna give one kind of like relationship type thing that you can adopt. Words are hard when you don't sleep. Yeah,
I think you could adopt it and you could adapt it to your life. So
fabulous.
both
That
were right. Mhm. Yeah.
I love that for me. Okay. They both work. So I am very passionate about working against small talk. And okay. So if I could kind of like look at my life from a bird's eye view, I would say pre moving to Thailand, I probably was your typical like small talker. I met a group of people there that became my lifelong best friends, and they were the best question askers and just invited me into a depth that I was like, oh my goodness, I never want small talk again because there is a richness and a connection happening here that when I was exposed to it, I was like, man, I don't want to go back. So I encourage people to do the same. So I invite people when you're first talking at a gathering to kind of think of this phrase to get curious but not nosy. And there's a difference, right? And so the difference is like the way that you ask a question and also the motive. So the goal is not to spread the information that you're getting. The goal is to dive deeper with someone to get to know them better. So curious, but not nosy. And what that looks like is picking up on things. Small talk is awkward, meeting people is hard. I get it. But you can learn a lot about someone in the first few minutes of talking. And so pick up on the illness of a parent, pick up on a race that they're running, a venture that they're starting, a dream that they have, and just ask questions that keep that going. And so kind of approach your conversation to pick up on that one thing. And once you have that hooked, keep going. And it is amazing how known people feel when you show interest and care. Now, what happens is I like to warn people this is kind of foreign for a lot of people, this type of intentionality and care in conversation. And so give people time. The first time, they might not ask you back questions that show interest, which can hurt. It could feel like it falls a little bit flat. But I can guarantee you there is a monkey see, monkey do effect that happens. That give it a few times and it'll come back to you. And that's where that friendship connection starts to cycle.
Well, and you've got the emotional connection, but you already talked about the physical connection is how they feel in the space. So you've
Yeah.
already set the tone that this is a place where they can feel
Mhm.
comfortable, where they can, be as transparent as they want to at the first time spending time with you. But it kind of like you said, you can't have one without the other.
Right.
And
Right.
you need all 3 components because one of them may draw the person in more than the other,
Yeah.
but the other 2 complete the experience.
Mhm. I
Yeah.
love it.
Okay, so we've got some people listening that I'm sure this is just right up their alley. I mean, like you said, it just comes naturally. They
Mhm.
love every element of this. It might come easy, so to speak. And
Yeah.
then we've got some new learners today. We've got some people that say, I just this is not in my vocabulary. I needed to do this. So I'm going to get started. I'm going to block out time.
Mhm.
Who do they invite? When you were in
Mhm.
Thailand and just you invited a neighbor or somebody random, you come back to the States and you
Yeah.
realize, I've got to start over here.
Mhm.
Where do you begin? Who do you start? Any last tips for somebody who, again, this is just a new experience for them. They're, I'm sure, going to follow you. We're going to link to you in the show notes and how they can learn more and more, Kayty. So, any other first steps for somebody who's ready to give this a go?
Gosh, I love this. I love this. And I love it because it is so simple. Wait, let me say that over. It is so simple but radical. And I combined them and I said simple. It is simple
We've got a
but
new hashtag, Simpical.
simple.
It was, you heard it first here, you guys. Okay.
It
I'm
is.
writing that one down, Kayty.
That's
Simpical.
so
Okay.
funny. I feel like so much of what I share is simple. It is a simple.
So
It
great.
is simple but radical. And I say these things and people are like aghast. Like they're like, how could you ever think about doing that? But this is what it looks like. I came back to this area and I realized that my built-in community, they had changed, I had changed. We were going to be in each other's lives, but they were not necessarily like my people. And so I had to kind of seek that out. I had to start over, right? And so um I I took my model from Thailand and tried it here, which was identifying people that I had friend chemistry with and extending an invitation. And the best way to explain that to people is dating. When you're kind of in the dating scene, you recognize when there's chemistry and when there's not chemistry. So kind of put yourself in that mindset and then transfer it over into the I don't want to assume only women are listening, but the girl you see in the grocery store every Friday when you go, you pass her in the cereal aisle and you're like, man, she seems really sweet. Or the person next to you on the treadmill at the gym and you're like, man, I bet they would be a good friend. I'll give a personal example. I had to go to the bank a lot. My husband's boss gave paper checks, still no direct deposit, and I would go cash it. And the banker, it probably took me 8 or 10 weeks. And I was like, man, I love this girl. And what happens is what happened was eventually I would say, hey, something along these lines. I would love to hang out. Do you want to go to and have a very concrete example in mind? So there's this vineyard near us that is just stunning. It's wide open. It's very comfortable to meet someone you don't really know, or some kind of creative workshop, the beach, whatever. But I would say, hey, you want to go to Gouveia? We can get drinks and bring dinner. And so I did this 10 times when I first got back to America. Out of the 10 times, one person said no, but the other 9 people, I bet you can imagine what they said. They said, I would love to. And you know what? This is the most powerful part. I was thinking the same thing. And so you were telling your daughter to be like the first person
First
to
friendly. Yeah,
first
first friendly.
friendly. And
Yeah.
I call this you go first hospitality. Everyone is waiting for an invitation. And what happens when we're all waiting? Nothing happens, right?
Mm.
And I feel like that's the scary part of where culture is headed, right? If if we don't have a group of us going first in the discomfort, in this radical simplicity, right? Change won't happen. And so you can sometimes it might feel awkward to just invite one new person to dinner. And so I've actually created these, I call them blind friend dates. And what I do, you could be new to a community or in the same community for 15 years and decide that you want change. This applies to both people. The first one, I think I invited 10 people and the text looked a little bit something like this. Actually, it was Instagram because I didn't have a lot of their numbers. I said, hey, I am looking to make some new friends. I'm sure you guys are too. None of you know each other, but you all know me. And so that kind of like cut the awkward, right? It's like, you don't have to worry that you don't know anyone. You all know me. Come, let's have drinks. And I said, I'm calling this a blind friend date, LOL. And after that, a few people dropped off and didn't come to my next one. Most of them are still in my life. And it starts with a willingness to go first.
I love how you said it.
Yeah.
You go first.
Mhm.
And, I've done that before too, Kayty. And I actually think there's something magical about gathering people that don't know each other.
Mhm.
And then there's something magical about stepping back for just a second. I remember I had them at my house and hearing the chatter and hearing the laughter and like pulling yourself out of it for just a second
Yeah.
and observing. I don't think there's a better sound than
No.
people in your home or something you've invited them to, and they're just enjoying each other with
Yeah.
no agenda, nothing fancy,
Yeah.
just people, women
It's the
seeing other
sound of
women.
belonging. That's what I call it.
Mm. Ah,
Yeah. Right? I think that it's so important for us to have some kind of structure in events. But when that happens, that's when I'm like, just let go. Like just let that happen because that's what people crave. Yeah.
mm.
Mhm.
That's a great way to sort of just cap it all is at the
Mhm.
end of the day, we do wanna belong,
Yeah.
and being the first person to initiate that belonging, it's pretty magical when it happens, and
Yeah.
then you just can't stop.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, first of all, I wanna be invited to that vineyard. I'm in Northwest Florida. But we're new friends, Katie, so
Yeah.
someday I'm gonna invite myself there, and I'm gonna invite
Come.
you,
I
and
love it.
and then
Yeah.
you and your husband and Wesley can come down to the Gulf Coast of Florida and our sugar
Goodness.
white sand beaches and our green water, and I'll invite you to one of my favorite places down here.
You
How's
don't
that
have to
sound?
tell me twice.
Okay. So, I wanna give you a gift because,
Mm.
you have taught us about all of these amazing things today in hospitality. So, of course, I have a gift for you. That's what a good hostess does, but it's a pretend gift. All right, it's pretend. And what it is, Katie, is and I'm curious to know your answer again with an 8-month-old and
Mhm.
a vibrant business and a lot of responsibilities, but my gift
Mhm.
to you would be the idea of a bonus hour
Okay.
that doesn't come out of any other hour of your day.
Mhm.
What would you do with that extra hour?
Hmm. Okay, so, every new mom has a diaper bag. I have what I call a Kayty bag, and it's all the things that make me happy when I have time to just, like, be still. And it kind of looks like a craft bag, I guess you could call it that, and it has a few word lettering workbooks, it has some watercolor notebooks, things that don't require any, like, electricity or plugins or anything like that, and when we go on a vacation, I bring it or I bring it to the beach, and I realized the other day that it's kind of been collecting dust in the corner, and I pulled it out and I told my husband, I was like, "I need you to keep me accountable. I need time. Maybe it's not going to be every day, but every week to just kind of enter into this." And so I think that would be my answer. I was going through it and I was like, man, these are all the things that really bring me a lot of, I don't use the word serenity a lot, but that's probably the best way to describe it. Just peace. And yeah, it would, an extra hour, I feel like I would give myself permission to do that more.
So, obviously, my prayer and my thought for you
Mhm.
is that within this next week, that you would
Mhm.
find that extra time, that hour for your Katie
Love it.
bag. I love
My
that
Kayty
too.
bag.
Your Katie bag. Oh,
So funny.
I feel like I have serenity just hearing about your Katie bag, and I guess I need a Cali bag.
You
I'm sold on
do.
that.
You do. I'll tell you what's in mine, and I think you'll love it.
Okay. I love that. Okay. I also want you to tell people where to find you, Katie, so that they
Sure.
can continue to grow in their hospitality and in their gathering so that they can be on this journey with you.
I love it. So there's a lot of change happening to our website and platforms over the next few months. If anyone's in the business space, you know how long a website overhaul and stuff takes, but you are welcome to head there, but just know it will be changing in the next few weeks. Gatherintentionalliving.com, on Instagram at gatherintentionalliving. And then our podcast is Making Room by Gather. And I am the one that manages all of our socials and everything. So DM me, talk to me. I love connection. So don't be a stranger. Yeah.
Obviously, we will not because you've welcomed us in, Katie. Thank you so much. And we also know that all your content today, simplical. So you've simplified it and it's radical. And so I've gained so much today, Katie. Thank
Love
you
it.
so much for making time for us.
Absolutely. This was a joy. Thank you so much, guys. Stay in touch.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you next time. God bless. Thank you for joining me on the TikTok podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and leave a 5-star review. Your feedback fuels our mission to help you master your time. Set your alarm for our next episode, and until then, make every moment count.